Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of I Am Legion for Dying Light 1 and 2. My name is Jason, the creator of I Am Legion for Dying Light 1 and 2. And tonight I wanted to include you guys into something that is pretty exciting. So I know a lot of you have been watching a lot of the progress over the last couple of months. There's been a lot of changes, there's been a lot of new content, so huge shout out to the Patreon supporters who are continuing to support my work. Thank you everyone to the Discord community, the Nexus community, and the YouTube community for continuing to drop in, give me feedback, and continue to progress this mod and the support for this mod. So tonight I'm doing something a little different. So I got pretty excited about the upcoming Dead Island 2 coming out, and so I thought I would take a moment to go back to my roots, to go back to the game that first got me excited about zombie games, especially open world zombie games. And so tonight I'm going to be diving into a little bit of development on a game that some of you may have played, some of you may have not. But after tweaking and changing some things and experimenting over the last couple of nights, I'm excited to say that I think a lot of you are going to want to go back and take a look at this older game, because I think that there's a lot of content here that is just like, you really get caught up on a lot of the new technology and a lot of the new graphics and the appearance of things, and you really start to kind of forget, you know, what game mechanics are like in certain older games. So let me switch the view really quick so you can see what I'm talking about here. So this is going to be I Am Legion back to Banoi. So this is going to be, the first part of this is going to be Dying Light, or Dead Island 1 rather. So the first game, and that's going to make way for Riptide right after that. So I've already started making the adjustments, the same as I Am Legion for Dying Light. I've already gone through and started messing with the engine, messing with the reshade, messing with the AI, messing with the weapon systems, messing with a lot of the view distance systems and a lot of the different systems to try to create something that's a little bit more intense than the original, while also remembering that you can't actually climb in this game, so you can't get away necessarily the same way that you could in Dying Light. So I am continuing to look at what this game could offer for co-op and being able to grab your buddies and go through an older game that had amazing content and amazing storyline, and being able to actually enjoy that with your friends, and also a challenging new environment. So let me show you guys kind of the new gameplay, the new playthrough. I have started messing with a reshade as well, so you can see here bringing it up to date and trying to get those graphics up to par with what I would hope from the Dying Light engine. And so let's go ahead and start crawling through. So the first and foremost, what I've started doing is creating that Survivor edition of the mod. So the first mod is always, or actually ultimately it ends up being Casual Survivor, and what that ends up being is a version of the mod where essentially the world is hunting for you, it's aware of you, while maintaining a lot of its original difficulty, and also keeping a lot of those original systems so that you can enjoy the lore rather than constantly running for your life. And a lot of that comes down to just being able to absorb the scenery, absorb, you know, the actual storyline without just like running for your life every time you turn around. And so he actually did quite a bit of damage there. But I think one of my favorite things going back to this game is actually looking at the physics system, looking at the reactions of the zombies, and what that looked like for a game where you didn't have that verticality, you didn't have that climbing. Everything was supposed to be based on walking around an environment, because it really does change the intensity of the game. And I know when I first started playing the actual hotel scene and getting back into the story, the first time I met the infected, I was actually like, oh shit, like what the hell am I going to do here? Because all you can do is throw weapons at them and kind of hope that you can get in the right timing on your hits to where you can survive their attack. And as you can see there, was able to survive that one, but it is challenging. I don't know yet what Ultimate Survivor is going to look like for this mod. It's going to be a good mix of the runners, similar to the actual Ultimate Survivor for the other games, but I am going to have to be more mindful of keeping those mechanics around that allow you to actually enjoy and run around this island without climbing to your safety. And I will say there's been quite a few times that I've actually been able to take quite a few hits in this game and survive. And still trying to get the balance down and get the playstyle down. But I'm super excited by what I've seen in the code so far. Just the ability to get this AI more reactive and actually hunting you inside the island has been super creepy. Once you get into the more populated areas, it definitely makes an environment that has you on your toes. So being able to actually get good weapons feels like a great reward. And so this first part of it is also leading away the enemy. So I know that's a big part for Dying Light 1 was this idea of, okay, so if I can't take out all of these zombies, you know, how am I going to fight this many? And so part of that comes into actually trying to lead the enemy away from the areas you're trying to search. So instead of actually fighting everyone, just trying to loop them out and lead them away from the environment so that you can double back, quickly search, and they're going to slowly start to wander back. So let me head out here and let's see, they're out in the water here. And I'm also continuing to look at the spawn system here. I am trying to increase the spawn system while making the spawn system not as, you know, we don't want a constant flood of zombies for basic Survivor. So,
what do we got here?
Yeah, the infected in this game are no joke. I also am very. I was kind of shocked when I saw the actual ragdoll systems inside this game. Again, it's one of those things where you just kind of forget over time how good something was and what it felt like, and then you get back into it and you're just like, damn. So with Dying Light 2, even with this new brutality update that they're doing, I think it's well overdue compared to some of the content in the older games. Just because once you actually start to play the older games, it's kind of night and day how good those systems were compared to some of the newer games. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me considering they've had so many years to improve a lot of these systems. And I do realize that there is a difference between Dead Island and Dying Light. I do get that. But the core mechanics and the actual game itself, what's in the engine, is largely the same. The ability to move between these engines is, or between these games is actually very easy once you identify how you want to modify the engine itself. I'm going to have to pay attention. I'm going to get my ass kicked. I think there was one in there. But I do also like the fact that it appears that there is a lot of information kind of hidden in the engine that I'm not entirely sure got turned on for the final playthrough of the game. And so I am trying to continue to look at what systems are in the game and what systems didn't get turned on to see if we can add some additional content for this game as well. I think we would all, if we're going to revisit, like to have some new things to experience. Here's where they all ended up. Oof. There was also a lot of mechanics in this system or in this game that were more arcade-ish, but I actually think a lot of them were done well enough to where even though it feels very much like an arcade game, it's done to the point where you still have certain levels of intensity that when you do actually get those more fun game modifications, weapon modifications, they felt really rewarding to get those on your weapon. I actually, once again, similar to a lot of these different games, kind of forgot about, you know, just how much of the workshop kind of gameplay was in this game and how much that impacts the way that you find weapons and continue to use weapons inside the game. just kind of... I have also not set up all my key bindings here, and so I may be a little janky with my play style here. I do love that they also added the throwing system in this game. It really does make a huge difference to be able to just throw these weapons and watching the physics. All of that, and that chest is locked. Yikes. Really quickly, I'm also going to share on here. I know I started the stream, but I did not actually share this on the Discord channel. So let me throw this up. And I guess I also need to go in here and edit the name. Okay. There we go. I apologize. I wanted to make sure the name was correct here as people are joining the stream. So I definitely need some weapons here. So I'm going to switch here in a second back over to the actual development and show you guys a little bit of my process as we're going through and can continue to talk about some of these updates as we're going. But I did want to kind of show you guys what has been done so far and what we can continue to look forward to here before the release tomorrow. So the plan right now is to release this version of the mod here once I refine it a little bit, and then that's going to come out here tomorrow, and then the plan is to also have the Riptide version release, and then Friday I'm planning on actually working on the new Dead Island 2 live. So I'm going to actually dive in and actually play some of the original or the vanilla gameplay through once that releases, and then we're going to go ahead and start on the first version of the mod shortly after. I think one of the other big systems in this game that I kind of forgot about was the car mechanic. So I'd kind of forgotten that you could get in a car and drive. Not only that, you could go in and actually pull your friends into the car as well, and up to four players could all work together and go to different locations in a vehicle. That is actually pretty fun. Hey Unbound, thanks for joining. Yep, that is the current plan, is on Friday. I've already got the new version locked and loaded, and we're going to play for a little while and kind of stream out the new content. And then shortly after that, I'm going to start working on the first version of the mod. Unless for some reason they've restricted files or, something that will drastically change that plan. Excited to get started. I'm super excited by these trailers. So similar to all of these games, one of the things that was kind of immediately apparent and is something that is exciting, it adds little details, but being able to go in here and change the world by adding onto the spawn systems is always something that I've enjoyed about these games. And for this one, I actually tried working on adding some decals. So the original game had a very limited decal system and view distance. when they added the definitive edition, I think more of that was actually for console support as well as updating the PC version. But when they added this update, they didn't really do too much. You can find stuff all throughout the engine that you can turn up. And one of the things that I did turn up here and what you're seeing is the vegetation has all been turned up. The actual scale of the vegetation as well is become more blocked out, feels a little bit more overgrown. And I went through and actually increased the amount of trash. So all this trash you're seeing in the road right now is also something that I was able to get access to. And I was actually surprised how easy it was, because little details like that can go a long way, but again, still trying to find that balance. Don't want it to be too ridiculous, but it's fun to kind of be able to quickly make the map feel like shit hit the fan. So I know for this first quest, it's all the way over on this side of the map, so I'm probably going to just play around a little bit more inside the engine and continue to talk to people, but then I'm going to get back to modding the game itself, and we can continue to discuss while I mod. Hey, Unbound. So Unbound said that he has it played pre-ordered as well. Hey, I would love to join a multiplayer session. As long as you guys don't mind me streaming it out, I think that'd be a lot of fun. I can't believe it's Epic exclusive. We'll have to see how that changes with time. Steam's got to come back around and say eventually. Also, one of the things I'm looking at, so again, the map is aware of you, so every AI agent on the map is kind of paying attention to you if you're in their field of view. And so this is going to change the game quite a bit here, where before you had each encounter, so when I was playing the vanilla through, is basically it's like each encounter was set up to where you really would take out like one group of zombies, and then you would encounter another group of zombies, and then you would encounter another group of zombies. I'm trying to change that up a little bit in the sense that I want these zombies to start communicating with each other the same as Dying Light, to where they're actually hearing each other get upset. And as you stick in an area, you're likely to bring in more zombies from around the area. So the map is always slowly kind of moving down or moving towards you, which makes the map feel a little bit more intense, more likely to catch you unawares while you're looting or while you're trying to get open a gate or a lock. And that's always been, I like those unscripted jump scares where the map actually doesn't feel boring, but actually feels like it's looking for you. In addition to some of that is, I've also tried to update their mechanics to where their physics systems are a little bit more activated now. They have more chances. Ooh, got caught. They have more of a chance to actually fall down and interact with the world. Before, certain ones, especially like the ones that ran and that kind of thing, they essentially had one purpose, which was to run. These guys will actually interact and clip onto the world elements a little bit more, and so you will start to see more of them kind of fall down and kind of blunder through the environment, which I really enjoy. I have not been able to get all these guys climbing yet, and I was actually going through and looking at some of that to just kind of see how they set up that nav mesh, and I did notice how much the player is actually not really able to climb as many things as I was hoping. If you can, as most of the older games, if you can jump on top of objects and kind of stay up high, you can get access to a lot of things, but the ability to actually jump up and get over that ledge doesn't exist, and so you've pretty much got that old school cylinder kind of player controller, so it doesn't actually detect any edges or anything like that. For the human AI, I've continued to dial up the grouping systems and allowing them to work together to attack. I'm still looking at kind of how these systems... Ooh. If I want to go down here, this is probably going to get me killed. Not probably. This was definitely a bad idea. Let's see if I can just get past here. And so I'm still waiting to get to a point where I can actually interact with more humans. To that point, if you guys have save games, if you guys are also playing Dead Island and you would like to join the Discord community and share your different save games, those always come in handy when testing and being able to get through the different parts of the game. More than likely, I'm going to try to get access to, a 100% completed save game, but that doesn't ever really cover all of the different quests and different areas of the game where you'd really want to do additional testing. And so some parts of this are probably going to have to be left up to discovery of what worked well and what didn't. And so we'll probably still have to refine this after it comes out. For the factions in the game, so as always, I'm always looking for the opportunity to get in new enemies. I did notice that with this game, they actually have a very interesting way of getting unique characters into the map. So the spawn system is actually pretty straightforward. It's all very scripted. And so the idea of going in here and replacing some of those systems is possible. So actually turning more of this into bandit overrun, hotel centers and stuff like that is possible. It didn't have a map editor to my knowledge, and so because it didn't have the map editor, more specialized environments probably can't be created for those enemies. But as far as like randomly spawning them out into the environment, that's probably very likely to occur here soon. I think the big thing is that here soon, I Am Legion will tackle 5 games. So currently it's been in Dying Light 1, Dying Light 2. Here soon, I see it in Dead Island 1, Riptide, and soon to be Dead Island 2. And so because of that, I'll have to continue to go between games and kind of update as I go. But so far, that's actually worked out pretty well for Dying Light. Because you get ideas as you switch between the two. And so I'm hoping as I go through, I'll continue to uncover systems in Dead Island that are also similar to Dying Light, and hopefully we can get some more content added to the game. So I am also looking into utilizing the RPAC system to try to get more content into each game, where that crossover is possible. I think the biggest problem is probably going to be like everybody's always like, oh, hey, could we get new zombies, pulled into the game? That one is always down to like how they skin and bind a skeleton. Maybe there's overlap between the two teams and how they set these characters up. I will say I was actually really shocked at the amount of models in Dead Island 1 versus the amount of models in Dying Light. Dying Light 1 I was going through the list the other day and it was actually like, wow, they really did put a lot of time into creating a good amount of enemies for you to be able to fight in this game, and I do appreciate that. Enemy to kill. Guess there was a quest up there that I didn't go do. But I do also just love this map. When revisiting this game, I got super excited because it's just been a long time since I've played on these maps. I do wish I could get more of the parkour elements into this game, but I do appreciate a lot of the systems that they worked on. Oh, nope. Oh, crap. Yeah, Michael, when I was looking at the trailer, I think that's, again, what just got me excited about diving back into these games, because the Dead Island crew for the second game, it looks like they've pretty much taken most of what was missing from Dying Light 2, and they're like, oh, don't worry, we'll add it to our game. which, you know, after the last year of development, it's kind of been funny trying to get so much new content in. It's nice to see where you have a game that looks like it has a pretty good base. Not that we can't always add more content. So the DLC content's kind of a tricky one. I have tried to always avoid those unless they've released it for everyone, and there's no longer the ability to purchase DLC content, which I'll look at for Riptide. I want to look here at the comparison between how much the ambient occlusion and the ray tracing is doing here. Actually, there's a good amount of shift there. But I think the biggest thing is always just trying to make sure that there's no way that Deep Silver or Techland ever, you know, reaches out and asks me to take down content due to it, you know, leaking or, you know, making them no longer earn the money that they deserve for this game and for Dying Light. But I think for this one, I think that is possible. I think one of the things that's interesting, though, is that they themselves didn't do that. I think they did make one additional character available, but I was actually looking at their character select system in general for this game and was curious. You know, I did do a form of character selection for Dying Light 2, and I am very interested to see if there's more that can be done for Dying Light and Dying Light 2 to actually select a character and have specific skill sets, you know, bound to specific characters. That's a, you know, it's a certain type of play style that's that can be pretty exciting if you do it right. And so I do want to play through this one again and just kind of see how they did that mechanic and get used to it again, because you know there was a lot of games that did a lot of interesting things back early on that, you know, you don't see a lot of that done anymore. And I am curious if that's based on market research or, you know, not enough development time or where some of those systems have gone. But I think kind of the theme with these mods is always like, at least for me, is always like, you can't take them all yet. And to be honest, it doesn't even make sense to do so. Just because you don't really earn... Ooh, I'm going to get shanked. You don't really earn a lot for doing so. Let's see if I pick them down this mountain. I don't think I can actually... I want to review the kick system and see if we can make more of that physics based. It reminds me of Dead Island or Dying Light a little bit, where the first kick is kind of AI or animation driven, and then the following kick is physics driven, which you don't usually expect. Like, it's only because of Dying Light that I've started to notice a lot of that. If people hadn't called it out like they did for that game, I probably would not have realized that was a thing. But they really do. They react in the same way each time. So this is kind of cool. So I've updated like the draw distances in the engine, and you can see here. So in the standard game, you can't see any of those decals down on the beach. Pretty much all of this is cut out at this point. And just these simple modifications have already made it to where even the small clutter is there, but the blood and all these different models, normally that's just not even loaded in. And it's kind of funny, I've increased the rate of like sticks and branches and stuff like that along the beach to kind of indicate where they didn't get a chance to go clean up in the morning, like I'm sure they do at most of these resorts. But I do think that there's more here that can be done with this engine. And I'm excited so far because it hasn't really seemed to struggle with some of the changes that I've made so far. I've really been able to boost a lot of these systems, and the game really is very pretty. I think one of the things I always noticed about the first one, especially, is they had a glitch with the decal system. And let's see if this fixed it all the way. Yep, looks like that's working. So in the first game, I don't know if anybody else ever realized, it's like you would come around these stairs and that would be completely pixelated garbage. I mean, that would be like, you know, you couldn't even read it, and you had to get up all the way to about like right here, and then it would pop in. And so it does look like the engine, and that's even with just the regular definitive edition, but it does look like with some modification you can actually get these the engine to respond a little bit more with these different pieces of debris and stuff out here in the world. Different decal systems. And as you can see from all the way up there, up top, what we were seeing up there is actually the same thing as what's down here, which is nice. Turn in this quest, and then I think I'm going to go ahead and dive back in and start working on some more systems. This next part that I'm going to work on is going and actually trying to take the engine code from Dying Light 1 and copying over some of the settings and engine code from Dying Light 1 into this game to see if we can unlock anything that may have been hidden in the actual engine update that is not enabled currently. But I have to say again, you know, even comparing to like Dying Light 2, whoever decided to put this like ash effect in the air, I don't know why, but that has just really like blown my mind as far as like once I've dialed up all these other graphics, the map feels very nice with these graphic effects. And whoever put in the blue haze, I did not like the blue haze. But luckily with reshades and a lot of the stuff we have available these days, you can get rid of that. So I'm going to go ahead and shut down here. And let's start diving through this next update. So for any of you that are new to the stream and kind of how I work through this, top left corner is always going to be the extracted files. Bottom left corner is going to be my mod. Far right is going to be the executable or the launchable, Steam, whatever it is. And then dead center is always my data pack. So as I go, I can quickly jump in and test. So we're going to go ahead and start diving in. I haven't started looking at the comparison between Riptide and this first game. And so because of that, we're not starting there. We're first just going to start on what content is available inside of the Dead Island engine. And then from there, once we have a good stable base and we have kind of the difficulty split, then I'll start looking at what's in Riptide. Can we bring more over from Riptide into Dead Island? And again, I have to review and look at kind of their licensing and see if there's DLC content and that kind of thing that they don't want. Obviously, those are two separate games. So the process would be, if I figured out a way to do that, even if it was Dead Island content into Dying Light, the process would be you utilize my installer and you would point to the direction. You basically say add additional content from other games, and you would point the installer from one game to the other. So you would basically say like locate my Dead Island install, and then from there it would do all the work. And so that would be my way of trying to make it more dependent on the actual game. Let me go ahead and actually, for that link that I've got, I just realized inside of the Dead Island, or inside the Discord channel, I realized, thank you for everybody that's jumping in. I realized because I shared it before changing the name that a lot of people are probably jumping in to see what I'm working on for Dying Light 2. So let me go ahead and see if I can remove that, and see if I try to do it again, if it will grab the new name here. That's okay. Doesn't really matter. So first, let's go ahead and grab Git and make sure everything's pushed. Everything's pushed. And so let's go ahead and dive in. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder here. And we're going to go grab the I Am Legion mod. And actually, we're going to go a little bit up to the extracted files. So let's go to the latest extracted files. And then where we're looking here, I'm going to start with inside scripts are all of our var list. And so I'm going to go through here first, I think, and start to see if we can compare between these two things. And what I might do, let's just see how far off we are real quick. So let's grab a folder here, say Dead Island. And maybe we'll do all of this external first and just kind of compare, say, Dying Light. So inside the Dying Light folder, let's grab all of these. And then inside of Dead Island, we'll go in here to scripts and grab all of these. And let's do a new compare. Grab this folder, grab this folder, and we'll just compare it. And look at that. Look at how many of those are actually matching, which actually gives me a lot of hope that this could be something that we could start moving content. The one thing, and if anybody knows, sync up with me on how to do this, how to tackle this challenge, because as far as getting into their code to figure out how they're doing the DLC system and figuring out how to inject the DLC system officially is something that I've been looking at for a little while. And so if anybody is familiar with the DLC process, give me a shout out. Just because I think for a lot of these things, it would be easier to just come up with a DLC process rather than... So it looks like the only difference here is that they did like a blend, and then they did kind of an omnidirectional wind, which is interesting. So because of this, so this gives me a lot of hope. What I'm going to do is we're going to go back to GitHub, and then in here I'm going to create a new branch, and we're going to call this, I always do mine by year, Q, still in Q2, yeah, or Q1, Q2. I'm going to do feature, and then we'll say engine improvements. And let's jump in and we'll push that out. And then what I like to do is just do an initial push here on some of these things. If we end up wiping it, it's fine. But I'm really hopeful that a lot of these things will end up working. So we'll go in here and grab only the ones that are not the same. So let's go in here because we don't need to waste time on the ones that are the same between the two games, because we're definitely not gonna change those. I will say that that's really odd that they have the Be the Zombie files in Dead Island. I don't remember a Be the Zombie mode in Dead Island. I think they were actually doing a lot with these like research projects. I think they were actually doing more than they've ever released. Every time I get a hold of this and I look at like the code in the background, it's like they must actually had a lot of fun coming up with some of these more baseline things that they ended up just not using, that a lot of them end up in all of their games. I mean, if I go and I extract each one of these games and I do a comparison between each one, it's shocking how many of the things it's like, oh, there's that again. I can't believe that's in a game that's, whatever, 9, 10, 12 years old, and then here it is again in a brand new release game. It's like, whoa, that's fun. What is that and how do we turn it on? So there's obsolete. We'll leave that one alone. Saturation. Here's sky files. It's like both of those are different. And here's wind files. Okay. So what I'm going to do is basically just really quickly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push. This might actually be easier to see on this side than it will be otherwise. But so all we have to do is stage these files. And then I'll go over to my Dying Light folder. And we'll go and grab the same files really quick. So say ambient. I didn't do Be the Zombie because I don't think Be the Zombie exists. Again, shout out to me on here if you remember there being a Be the Zombie mode in Dying Light or Dead Island. I definitely remember kind of the infection effects, but I don't remember any type of actual system. We're gonna leave. Let's see, MID, menu, saturation, sky, and then wind. And if we copy these over, I think it did get one that I didn't copy earlier. What is that, menu? So it's erase menu, say discard. Because I would actually, it'd be faster to see it in here. So we'll say menu, stage it, and then we'll grab the Dead Island or Dying Light menu, like that. Okay. So now instead of going through the wind merge, I can actually just very quickly go in here and see kind of what they're getting rid of. So like, for example, here they're actually getting rid of an environmental probe, which is interesting. So we'll discard that because I want to keep any type of environmental probes. We have an auto exposure. So I was actually looking at that earlier because that is one of the differences. I did notice that the time didn't really seem to pass, but the shadow is moving. So if you watch the shadow, it looks like it wants to move, and I did pull over the actual time file. So time updating is actually, I think, a thing in the engine. It's just disabled right now. And so I do want to look into that. But with this exposure issue, you know, there's this adaptation. When you look around, you go into an interior, you step out into the bright sun. I did think that the Dead Island original game didn't do a lot of that. But I know Dying Light did a lot of that. And here are exposure files for doing that. So I think I'm gonna actually stage that and we'll see what that does. So for these types of overlay effects, we're gonna get rid of that because it needs those. It gets rid of a player tank. We want to get rid of that. It gets rid of a health. We want to get rid of that. It adds a depth of field value. It changes the post-processing. We're going to get rid of that. Well, no, because it's not going to be there because they're different names. So can't do that. So we're going to get rid of that. Cure aura. It gets rid of the exposure. It gets rid of a fade, a loading screen, and then it sets the game's saturation to 0. So what we're going to do is get rid of those. And let's see what happens if we set we'll keep that, and let's add this game saturation line, because that actually, I always like to try to do what I can inside the engine instead of doing a reshade, because it's not as performant. And so we'll see if we can actually get, a couple of things added here. Here it looks like we actually have an aim system. And I think these are the effects that happen when you do these systems rather than actually variables on those systems. Probably get rid of those and this. And we'll just actually discard this because we don't want to get rid of anything, and post-processing effects probably don't do too much. It's getting rid of weather on the interior. And it's setting that instead to indoor on. So my guess here is that that's Dying Light's way of saying use weather inside. So it's just switching those out. I don't know what this SLR is, so we're going to leave that. Lighting sun on. Lighting sun on. I'm going to actually open that file really quick. And add that. And just see what happens. I'm guessing that's probably not going to work well if they didn't do appropriate like shadow blockers and stuff like that. Well, actually, before I get into line changes, let's just focus on the update for the Dying Light code versus the Dead Island code and just see what we get. So here we have a value that they've greatly increased in Dying Light that they didn't increase in Dead Island. So let's and actually I'm doing this all wrong because, and I realize I think I've only done this on exposure. Before I go too far down this road, I should have done this to begin with, so I apologize. I need to do initial push because I see these changes now, but the problem with that is that if we go back in, if we go into the game and a bunch of stuff's messed up, I'm not going to be able to go line by line really quickly and say, well, what changed? So let's go ahead and stage that. Looks like they changed the fog far system. Outside of that, they got rid of a lot of terrain systems, it looks like. And then, ooh, I saw a fun one. Let's keep the fog far in case that helps move fog further out, which I don't think that's what that does, but was that also lighting indoor? So I'm not sure with the lighting indoor that this is going to do much anyway, but I did notice that this is like one of my favorite systems on ENBs on Skyrim. It's amazing how much of a difference it makes to be able to like see the cloud shadows on the ground. And so it's nice to see that they have some form of that here, but again, I'm going to come back to that. I don't want to make any of those types of changes just yet. So then they have where they're adding some bar lists and then player scaling. Very interesting. Let's get rid of this. Material IDs. So the original count is 8. And row per material, they're reducing that. It's interesting. Mat ID. Mat count. So they've upped the material count. I wonder if that would actually... See, that says where it's going from 8 to 32. So that one's going to be interesting because I don't know if that one's going to actually cause some engine freakouts. And then with the rows, I'm going to get rid of the row change just because it sounds like that could cause issues. So let's hit discard, and it looks like that got rid of everything. So we're actually going to go in here and say mat ID. And I just want to change this mat ID to 32 again. So we will keep that. With the menu, we want to get rid of that. Saturation, looks like they're just removing a 0. With the sky, they're reducing the scatter from 10. I'm actually disappointed in that. I was hoping that there would be more there, but it looks like both of the sky systems are about the same. And then they're adding omnidirectional wind. So not that many changes. Ambient did change a little bit. Exposure changed a little bit. I said let's launch and just kind of see what changed. Let's see if anything got unstable here. And we'll continue to play. So let's see. Keep forgetting to remove one shader. Failed to compile and reshade. It's going to error every time. Everything loaded in, no issue. That exposure system, see, that's what I was talking about earlier, and that does give me the Dying Light vibes versus how it was earlier. That's actually really nice. Because the idea is that as you move your camera around, it kind of shifts and changes your camera as you go, just like your eyes do to adjust. And so maybe now that we know where that value is, we can actually play with that a little bit more. Because I think one of my favorite things about this setting is that you have this hot, intense island. Let me make sure this was not all coming from my reshade. I don't think it is. No, it's just more noticeable with the reshade. Huh. Okay, so for a first pass, that was not bad. The wind seems like it's doing. It's kind of funny because on the earlier editions of I Am Legion, I messed with the wind factor, and I love that it's the vertex based wind, and so when it applies to the model, it would just like tear the leaves off to the side kind of thing. But this actually looks really nice. I'm going to do a comparison video at the end of this where I actually compare between the two to see how many of these changes are super noticeable. But I am curious now. You know, it's always that thing of like, well, hang on, what did the wind just look like? Because it does, I mean, as far as it goes, it is getting a kind of a shifting pattern of wind all over it. And so I do wonder if that's the change. It does look very much like Dying Light. But that's going to be up to the video to decide here. Okay. First pass successful. So let's go ahead and push that. Dying Light 1 changes. I have tried to compare between Dying Light 1 and Dying Light 2 to see if I could get some of the changes from Dying Light 2 back into Dying Light 1. Sadly, I don't think that works. But I am excited to see with Dead Island 2 what can be transferred over from Dying Light 2. If that's worth doing. It might actually need to go the other way. Kind of depends on what they give us here in a couple of days. I'm super excited to see what they crank out here. So the next change that I want to do is actually go in and add on this lighting. I do want to turn on the cloud shadows. I am curious. They have, I don't know if that's volume fog. It's off. Let's turn that on. And I always I think my favorite thing is to I don't know the shortcuts for doing this in Notepad++, but I've really come to love and enjoy switching between. So what I like to do sometimes is just go in here and select each one of these and then hold down Control D, and it'll actually go through and highlight all the things. So in this case, it's all the things that are turned off. And so you can see here that it's just a fun way of very quickly going in here and saying these things are highlighted. Heat's funny because heat's always been in their system. So I found heat in Dying Light 2 as well. They actually have this heat wave system that if you turn it on, messes up the engine. Like there's like these massive heat wave textures everywhere. So I don't know if that's from an earlier game that they got it right and it's just transitioned with, or maybe it's the other way. Maybe they never got it right and they're getting it over time, but I'm not sure. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go in and turn some of these systems on. So starting with heat, let's go in, and heat's probably not going to need to be like that. And then for performance, we have like render reflections. Let's turn all that on. Desaturate. Let's go and turn that back up. And then for glow, it's fun. They actually have a glow system in there. Here's also an exposure system. So like for example, if I wanted to go in here and do all the balancing behind the scenes instead of doing a reshade, I think my biggest thing about that is that everybody has their own preference of what they like inside the games. And so because of that, you know, you never want to really force anybody to have to enjoy it a certain way. And then here's a cloud layer opacity. Huh. Let's turn those on really quick and just see what we got here. Then wind power. And it's interesting though that the lighting just, it still says indoors though. So one thing I want to probably do is open up our, I guess this is it. So let's say close other tabs. And let's say find in files. And let's see if that's listed anywhere else. Here's like a veritable file that's being loaded in, I'm assuming. But it's got all sorts of fun things like ocean level and wave noise. That's really fun. Rain strength. And so I have found from modding these different games before, sometimes you'll find where they had like an E3 demo config that they, you know, for the shareholders or whatever, they showed them what the engine could actually do. And then for the actual release, they turn a lot of those systems off. And so I'm always curious with these types of systems, like, you know, is this something that they demoed at one point? Or is this the actual what's being used? It's easy enough to find out once you just start breaking things. So they also have this clouds new under scripts tools. Okay. So we'll go here, scripts. I had to have gotten these mixed up. Oh yeah, it's where I've drug over the Dying Light folder. I was about to say, that can't be right. There's no way there's all these player appearances and all these things. So under tools, here's some more. So it looks like I probably need to also, let's also search the Dying Light files really quick. So if we go here and we say, close that off. Say var list, because they also have these inside of view presets, and they also have a tools. Okay, and then they also have descriptions. Those are actually probably the in-game descriptions for those, but they also have a tools folder. So that's where we'll go next. So let's go in here and say tools. And let's go back to our win merge. And we did it with our first set. Now let's go in here and say delete. And delete. And then let's go over here. So this is going to be Dying Light 1. I named it wrong. Yikes. Dying Light. Yeah, I did. Dead. I hope this doesn't mess up my GitHub. Yeah. I have to fix that later. So then I'm like, I know that's not definitive edition of Dying Light. Alright. Dead Island. They shouldn't have named them so damn close. Alright. So let's go here. And then let's go over here to the actual Dying Light. Notice they do not have aerial view. But let's go in here and do a compare. So let's say refresh. Wow, look at that. So every single one of these is exactly the same. Okay. Well, once again, easy day. Maybe a lot easier to get away with some stuff here in the future. But I was hoping that would be more of an easy window of finding some files that were different so that we could improve some systems. But that now makes me want to say, okay, so what's in Reborn? So let's go look at Reborn really quick. Tools, nothing. So they have their var list out here because they updated their. I am really curious though. Maybe I'm getting greedy here, but let's find out what these settings are for Dying Light 2 versus Dead Island. Oh yeah. My pup has a really fun habit of informing us of when she needs something like love or anything at all by shaking. So if you ever hear metal shake in the background, it's my dog coming to inform me that I'm failing in my parental duties. All right. So that's interesting that you have something like look at that. That can't be right. Hang on. I had to have messed this up. Definitive Edition. Facial expressions. Look at that. They have Dying Light 1 files in Dead Island. So they really did just go back and update the engine by moving this stuff backwards. That's bizarre. I just found Brecken and Raheem in Dead Island. Okay. So, if that's the case, and you have several other systems, that are close. I mean, I'm just saying, the fact that I compared it against a game that was released in, was it 2022 versus a game that was released in 2016, and this many files actually match is still absurd. Okay, well, the next step is going to have to be, let's see what it looks like with some Dying Light 2 files. And let's just see. I mean, and these are the ones that match. So I mean, there's got to be some that don't. I mean, there's got to be some that are not present, obviously, but that means a majority of these are even in the same game, which is just, again, okay, fine. Let's see what we got here. So if we go in here and we say, wow, let's grab all of these. You can have a cube map generator file in here, which is fun. Depth of field is in here. The editor is there. Probably don't need that. The engine, and we'll copy these anyway. The engine, exposure, the fade system, fog system. I mean, when they, and again, not to hit on Techland here, it's just, I remember when the game first came out and everybody was harping about, okay, the graphics are not, as hot as we would like. We would like it to look like a newer game. The fact that I can compare it to a 2016 game and it had the same files at all means that this backwards compatibility thing is probably a factor here, which means, and what's exciting here, is that means Dead Island 2, if made by the same teams, may potentially be compatible with files from the other games. Which I get excited about because I'm sitting here going, hey, that's less work for me in my mod. I only have to write it once. I can just copy files from one game to the other. I like that. Sun rays, underwater, technique, water and wind. Okay, so these are all the 47 Dying Light 2 files that work, or that are present in Dead Island 1. And let's load this up really quick. And the challenge here is that, yeah, correct. I'm going to have to go and get the originals for each one of these. So let's go in here and say, just very quickly, select all of these. Actually, we might be able to go in here. All of these, like that. No, because that's not going to be it. All right, so let's go in here and say this. And we're going to stash these. And then let's first go through these initial ones that are present between the two. And so first we just have it zeroing out an ambient file, so that can get discarded. With the exposure rate, we have an int is changing, or what are they trying? A float value is changing to an integer value, which could work, but I'm guessing that one is going to be dependent on the system. So if anything, all I have to do is change that to 10. They have a new exposure rate that they've dialed in. And then they have a force current, force previous on here as well. They have a different mask, and they're getting rid of the area. So it does. So I think with this system, I think what I could do is I could use the values from the second game to update the system, which it sounds like they're just going from like 2 and 3.5 to 10 on the max. They're also speeding up the min and the max, but I would actually also argue that some of the stuff in the first engine I liked more than the second engine. So they added a color grading system. They have a glow extract. I'm really curious if we could actually get that in there. We're going to have to get rid of all of these removals, but they have this post-processing grading color variables. Which these are the ones I believe that they have been adding through their event. So for a lot of these, you know, they're not going to do anything unless you actually call them from within the game. We have the change of a name, which is actually interesting that these are the same. Discard. Get rid of this. We need to get rid of Fury there. We have some overlay effects and weather effects, map effects. If camouflage, stealth, exhausted, dazed, poisoned, in-game, toxic. Yeah, so you basically have some other values that they've added for specific things in that game, like decision making and that kind of thing. But I'm guessing we can pretty much do this on most of this. The aim system was in there. Throw marker, X-ray. Yeah. Without some of the other systems to actually call on these, none of these are really going to work. So I think it's pretty safe to say all of these are pretty much not going to work, and then the survivor sense and all this stuff at the bottom. So I think this one's pretty much just not really going to work. I think I am going to leave the common ones in there. I just don't think they're going to work because they're all set to 0, 0 anyway. So they have to get actually called by the game for them to work. But I could try turning them on and seeing if that actually works. So these are changes that I've made. And then menu option NB. And then menu option upscaler, and then sharpness. Interesting. I'm going to keep those just to see if that does anything. The sky, they add a skybox intensity, which they're also getting rid of, but I would argue that, as a lot of people have pointed out, skybox isn't great in the second game. I'm actually going to dump all of that. And then we have a new skybox position. And then some new textures, which those won't work. We're going to have to keep the old values. We can't get rid of those. And because they're not actually replacing anything. And then for these new values, we're going to get rid of any textures that they've added because those won't work. But I am curious about this UV. My guess is that it's changing how it's calling on the texture. I'm guessing those are not going to work. For the wind, it's adding a phase offset. It's getting rid of blur. Let's add that back. It's got a phase. So it's switching from a blur system to like a phase system. So I think a lot of that is just the naming system has changed. And then wind is enabled because I don't know if it's getting turned off at any point. That's interesting. And then they have these emitters, and then they're turning on the wind here. Okay, so let's stage those. And then for these other files, essentially I'm going to go in, and I think the way I wanted to do this earlier to save some time here is to grab these, bring the stash back, say unstage, which I think is what, enter? Yeah, enter. Okay, like that. Then go down here and drop this in. Say replace. No, because No, that's not going to work. So instead of replacing all of those, what I need to actually be doing is going in here and saying discard, replace, yeah, and then say this, okay, and then go file by file over here and select each one of these. Fun. All right, let's see here. Blur radial, cube map, debug. And let's go ahead and say initial changes for Dying Light 2. I guess how do I want to do this? I actually don't want to push that. So instead of doing that, I think I'm going to actually, I guess I could go the other way. I could go the other way and stage all of these and then drag in the files from Dying Light or from Dead Island and see what it replaces. That might save a lot of time here. So we'll say stage again, and then we'll start here and just copy these in because I know those are in there. And then we'll go and grab the rest of them to expedite things here. And then we'll say replace like that. And then we'll get rid of all of the ones that were not in there. Isn't modding fun? Discard. Yeah, that worked a lot better because it's a lot of files. But now what we can see is in here is changing it back to Dead Island. So it's currently set to it's currently set to Dying Light 2. And then as we're identifying things, we'll go in here and say remove that because obviously with like that one, you know, and we'll actually unstage. So with each one of these, we'll actually go in here and say discard. So we'll get rid of them one at a time. With the ambient, I'm pretty sure this was unstage. We realized that it was essentially just getting rid of values. For the blur, it's adding back the scale, but what it's doing is getting rid of a couple of these other Boku effects. And so what I'm going to try to do here is actually discard the deletion of these. And let's turn that back on because we still want the radial scale to be the same. It's going to get confusing really quickly, but with each one of these, and I guess the problem with this system is that it's not actually showing me the difference anymore because when I'm approving each one, it's now saying, you know, you get all of it, but we'll just see how this goes. So like we're getting some additional like blur values, so we might end up with some better quality blur from Dying Light 2. So let's go in here and say discard. We want to keep the radial blur, so let's stage that. Yeah. We will discard this and discard this. This is adding back a value for strength, rain strength, and then removing it being set to 0. I think I'm going to actually just discard this Stage. Well, so I guess that's the thing, right? Is that with the cube map generation, I feel like, let's look at that again really quick. So that's where it's getting the heat. There's a glow factor in there. And then it's getting super messy. Apologize, guys. I was trying to save time. It's actually costing me more time here. But, so those are the same because that's not from Dying Light. Yeah, it needs to be this one. I think it's the same between this and this. Yeah, okay. That's all the difference is that they're using a rain value here versus a rain strength value. So again, that's where the engine's calling something specific, so we can't really use one over the other. It might actually break systems. So let's just say discard. Looks like they have quite a few debugging systems in here, but most of that you can't actually get to. They've disabled a lot of the debugging systems. It looks like for the depth of field, it's adding back a lot of values that it was tearing out there. And we're going to say discard these changes. We want to keep that. The editor. See, the thing about the editor is that if they update the editor, just because it's present here doesn't mean it's present in the actual final result. So a lot of times with these editor files, it doesn't make sense to even mess with the editor. Now with the engine, this should be more what's been built. We do need to add back what was removed there. We have a couple of additional camera values here, along with the shadow map size. Looks like the shadow map size was already set for higher. Here's an Nvidia AO setting, and then wireframe. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to say discard, removing this. We're going to keep that and get rid of the shadow, and then discard the wireframe setting. I'm really curious to see if that actually does something. Say stage. Here it's adding back missing features, so we're going to add that back. And for some of these things, I'm going to have to figure out, it's always a challenge with these graphic settings, is that some things are specific to Nvidia, and so if any of the users don't have Nvidia cards, some of those things won't work anyway. This we're going to go, no, because it's restoring a naming convention there, so say stage. Here it's changing the auto exposures we talked about earlier. It's setting that to the Dying Light 2 values. I'm actually, because it's kind of in between, I'm actually more inclined to set it to just keep it where it's at, because I liked that shift earlier. We're going to get rid of the fade. Because the fade system, it looks like the naming convention is different. With the fog system, it looks like we have a bunch of new settings for like the height, the distance, some tiling systems here. So we want to get rid of the discard there and make sure we add back the values specific to the game. Say stage. We'll keep all these new game values, see if any of those are useful. We'll keep all these new game values, see if they're useful. There's a glow threshold. We want to add that back, say stage. Some new settings here for the glow effects. We'll keep those. Add back the threshold. Keep these. Discard these. Level latitude. Level north. Wonder if this helps with some of the rotation for like the daytime. Sorry, not the daytime, the time cycles. So say stage. This is undoing some of the changes I made earlier, so we're going to undo that. Matchmaking. Undo this. And then we're going to get rid of this because we want to keep those changes. This looks like it's adding noise back, so we're going to make sure to add the noise back here. This looks like it's adding back specific values for the performance, so we're going to add those back as they're going to be specific to the game. Here we've got where it's removing, it's actually reducing the number of dynamic lights, which is interesting. So we'll go ahead and remove that and see what it's like with this increased number of dynamic lights. It's also good to see where the range is for each one of these things, because I did change that somewhere else, but it looks like this ranges is actually going to do a lot. So let's add that. I know how much every person in the world loves the raindrops on the screen for Dying Light 2. So we absolutely have to make sure that those get into the game. I mean, I cannot stress enough how many times people have come to me and said how much they love all of those drops on the screen. So definitely want to make sure that those get back in there. And it looks like we're going to add this. Looks like a lot of these are specific to the game. And then they've got a couple here that are like, so like the blood, they've got blood splatter. That's not going to be able to find that. So we're going to remove that. And then these are debug values. We're going to leave these in. And so the rest of these should bring it back. Add the size back. So what this should do is this should bring it back towards the specific game. So we can make sure we're keeping the right values here. It's getting rid of things like max lifetime and moving it back towards time because that's more accurate. Let's say stage. Let's say discard. Shadows, so this is a good one where the shadows are being reduced, so we're going to discard that change and we're actually going to leave in the cloud opacity changes. This is again where this is being reduced and it's getting rid of all these new settings, so we're going to actually hit discard to that. And here it's getting rid of some new features. I don't know if any of these are actually going to work, but we're going to leave those in. We're going to make sure that gets added back. So we'll get rid of that like this. We'll hit stage. For here, we want to make sure that we keep some of these new settings. Again, it won't get accessed if it actually doesn't work. So I'm less worried about these actually causing anything to go wrong with the system. But I do want to make sure in this case, you know, where it's adding back these values that are missing, we want to make sure those are actually still in there. In this case, I've changed the wording from correction, or from strength and width, to correction and factor. So we're going to go and just discard, or wait, actually, no, I apologize. We need to add this back. And then with this, we hit stage. And here in a second, I'm going to take a break and jump off here. So for here, we're going to go in and make sure that we add those back. Let's keep these new ones. So that'll add that back to the technique here. For the underwater, it's going to add back these specific ones here. So we're going to add these back. And then for these, let's make sure that we keep all of the new ones while also, so it looks like it's getting rid of all these new ones. Let's discard those. I'm really interested about the underwater system because I don't actually think the underwater system's very good in the second game. It kind of reminds me of like a very I think before, where some people have like made different versions of Skyrim, like mods where you can see the water in different ways. Some people have done it really well where it's more realistic, and then some people have made it to where you can like see infinite amount of distance that is like perfectly clear. I always thought that the opacity and there's something just not quite right about the water in the second game. And so I am interested to see, that one needs to stay the same. I'm interested to see what that does. Here we've got this wave file that we'll need to get rid of. And here we've got this, let's hit discard, and we're also going to discard the renamed water files there because I don't think those are actually going to work. And then those are temp files, but they're actually being used. Looks like temp files made it in. And then last but not least, here's some wind files that we want to try and see how this goes. So we're going to go ahead and discard removing those, and there we go. So all of these are going to be changes and additions to what's already in there. So let's launch this and just see what we get. Hopefully I was able to go through each one of those and set that up right. I think I did, but let's launch and find out how I did here. And I really like, you know, in some games that you try to add like a reshade, it doesn't end up working out well because of the, it doesn't end up working out well because of the menu systems. But this game actually has fairly minimal menu systems. They're all pretty straightforward. So when adding like the ambient occlusion and that kind of thing to the game, it actually does really well. So I think this is still going to have to be one of those comparisons between the two. Removing the mod and checking it out, and then going back and doing like a comparison screenshot between the two systems and seeing. Because it is kind of hard to tell. I will say that probably the biggest one is that adaptation. I feel like that, the exposure adaptation, I feel like that is a lot better. And that's pulled from Dying Light 1. And then for these, for for these other systems, I'm going to have to probably, like I said, go line by line. But actually, that reminds me. So, like, now that that works, so let's go ahead and say Dying Light 1 and Dying Light 2 bar list files and do like this. Because that's where we can now go into, now that we have these staged, we can actually go in here and set these specific ones that I was seeing. So in here we've got, like, for example, we've got ranges right here where, so like sim range FX. So I'm guessing that's the physics system, any type of effects that are using the actual physics system. And I think I want to go ahead and just kind of start to double some of these and just test from there and seeing what changes. I know for some of these, so I was looking at the distance values that they had in there previously, and I know that I've found actually in the thousands as far as view distance, so I am really curious to see. Let's just do, like, let's actually just double for now and see what that does. And then if this was the value for Dying Light 2, then we're not going to go above that. And then environmental probes, I don't even know if they're using those. And then the culling size, shadow mesh cull size, and then distance threshold. I think we could probably go a bit higher on that, but that also gives me the idea to increase these values on Dying Light 2 as well, just because that should shadow offset, slice, shadows count. Let's continue to kind of go through here. Only add chrome size. So let me look up what type of shadow system this is really quick. I'll actually put shadow percentage closer soft shadows. Interesting. So that's currently off. Let's turn that on. I think this is a Dying Light 2 feature, so I'm not sure if that's actually even in the base game, but we're going to find out. And then for some of these other ones, let's go in here and say, I think that's debug. And then I know for a fact that the shadow system seems to be, is there a quality one? If there's a performance one, there's got to be like a render reflection on. I'm wondering if this is related to, and this is where the naming convention sometimes gets screwed up, where they have a render setting called performance, balanced, and then quality. Because it says performance, I don't know if this is related to actual system performance or if it's related to actually a setting. But in the interest of exploration, render reflection on, and then shadow sun HQ. Okay. Then level system, think the main system had a bunch of stuff in here that were set to off. So let's say anti-aliasing. Oculus Rift. What? Fed Island Oculus Rift. I forgot they did this. That's really fun. So this is a version of the game that was using, I'm assuming, just the camera system though. And man, that would be jarring to get knocked around like that in VR. So it really is. So it's literally just the camera system that they updated to be able to look in VR. But even then, the way he's moving his head. See, it's use cases like this, though, that would make you super nauseous. Alright, that's cool. I didn't know that that was a thing. Fun. So, time. Here's where they have the time system. Second, if we say okay. Review. Hmm. And I'm going to move a little bit quicker here just because these are lots of values here for, saying lots of different things. I think the one that I'm specifically looking for, though, is that there was an Nvidia there was an Nvidia setting in here. So let's go in here and say, actually, instead of using this one, let's go in here and say folder, scripts, video. Okay, so it was engine. I was trying to remember which one I saw earlier. So engine, which makes sense, has these Nvidia features, which I'm curious about. If we go in here and turn these on, what exactly that may allow us to do here. And then they have the ability to add wind to the grass, which is interesting. So let's enable these right here, and we'll leave wireframe off for now, but it's good to see that that's where wireframe is. And then in the main, and then SAAO, SR, we have several different settings that I believe these are actually set by Dying Light 2, so I don't know if those will actually work or not, but I guess what we can do now is, so we should have several changes here that turn on more experimental things. Let's load up and see what we get. Hey gamer bro, how's it going? Yeah, of course, man. So there are lots of good stuff still coming in for Dying Light 2. Slowly but surely. So, I mean, the game is looking pretty strong. I think probably the only thing... So there is still a limit on the shadows, because I was definitely getting some shakiness over there. Looks like it loaded in or updated, though. I am really curious about the shadow system in the game, because you can see here, with the modification, it's gotten better. But I think one of the things that makes this engine a little bit more obvious is the shadow system. And so I am a little curious here to see if we can, and I guess they never made it to where you can actually duck your head down underwater. So I think Riptide is where you first start to go underwater, but maybe not even Riptide. I can't actually remember. And no, there is wind applied to the grass. So that is happening. So if we go in here and say, I'm trying to tell if they've turned on some ambient occlusion here, if that actually worked. Game is looking a lot better than when I first started though. But it's hard to tell. Again, it's going to come down to comparison videos here. Look at that. Even so, that's actually the original system. So there's another render system that is separate, which is really interesting because the weapons, so it always relates with this engine and how it does the rendering. because it's the same issue with like the zombies, right? Popping in, popping out. So watch right here by the boat. So one of the weapon systems is rendering the weapons within the original vanilla rendering distance, which is nuts, but that's about right where the graphics were loading in earlier. You can still see right here off in the distance, the shadows are still pretty close, but that's like a separate shadow system, and so I haven't quite found that one yet. But as you can see, other shadows are rendering, but the foliage shadow is not rendering until a certain distance, which maybe that's a good thing. I'm not really sure if I think I know where the setting is to change whether they render shadows or not on the grass. Which you can see here as you move up, and it's actually more noticeable in different locations. But I think that pop in for weapons is probably the most noticeable thing right now that I'm interested to see if there's a way to improve. There's got to be. Because, I mean, look at all these other things that I've got. I mean, now I can... Let's run back up here to the top and see if there's any difference here. Yeah, I mean, definitely. That's a physics object floating out in the water. That definitely wouldn't have shown up previously. So that is pretty fun. I am curious here, moving forward with several of the other updates that I'm looking at here, how many systems from Riptide were exclusive to that release. They never released it as a DLC versus releasing it as a where they released it as a standalone project rather than as a DLC, which was always kind of shocking. And I think based on what I'm seeing here on the edging, no, it's still turned off. Very interesting. And the shadow maps look like they've gone down, but you can actually see here, and if I can find it in the system, I'm going to fix it. Along the edge of the screen, the quality is garbage. So along the quality on the side of the screen, they've got this effect that's occurring that I thought was chromatic aberration, but based on what I'm seeing here, it actually looks worse when I don't have the... It's because of the sharpening of the reshade that you really start to notice it. There's no way that's being caused by the reshade, though. No, and it definitely looks like chromatic aberration. No, that's worse. So it's like it's less, but it's almost like it's still occurring. I mean, it's definitely better. Did that fix it? Oh, see, that fixed it. So for some reason, the engine, when it first launched, is loading that in as a default. And so it has to be set off each time. So one last thing to test, and then I'm going to take a break here, is if we go into options, and this, for some reason, is being set to medium, and it actually has a very high setting. I think it's the only one that has a very high setting. The distance, which I just noticed that just updated, is actually being set on the back end. I don't think this is actually... I think this slider is actually messing it up, because there's actually a value that I'm setting on the back end that if I hit best performance or best quality, should load that in. But it looks like I'm going to need to figure out why it's... because it's supposedly turning this off, but it might be because I'm crashing the engine each time. I bet that's it. Is instead of hitting save and loading out, I'm just crashing everything out. I bet that's it. So So let's go look at these shadows now. Oh, that's way better. Oh, yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, and that is the first part of this. I'm going to continue to work on this into tomorrow and try to get this released for you guys prior. I'm looking at a day before the release of the new game so that for those of you who are continuing to watch and be wary of new releases, you guys can enjoy playing the original game if you own it. And looking forward to your guys' feedback as always. Obviously I haven't dove into the difficulty levels yet as much as the actual AI's ability to recognize the player, track the player over the nav mesh, grouping, density maps, all that good stuff. A lot of it's already been done. Now is just kind of for my own benefit, kind of understanding how their rendering system works, and understanding if more can be done here to enhance this experience. So actually, let's go ahead and just to summarize, let's go ahead and what do we do here? We'll stand on this chest. We'll knock the chair out of the way. Oh, that's not a real chest. All right, so we're going to stand on the hoops here. And looking at this, I'm going to take a screenshot. Okay. And then let's go and instead of crashing out, let's hit quit and save. So all these files will hopefully save in the engine now. Let's remove the mod. Watch this actually just be nothing. Didn't do anything this whole time. Delete the mod. Launch again. And this time we'll make sure to turn off the reshade because that is part of the modification here, right? Is the reshade. Go ahead and continue. It's actually really interesting. The main menu runs super choppy. I'm not sure why that is. But that main menu just seems to really just be super choppy. All right, so then we'll go here, turn around, and we'll look back. And I should have picked a single point to look at, which I didn't do. But what I can do here is actually, let's pull up my little gallery here. And it was somewhere right above. Oh, okay. I was about to say, wow, it didn't even get the umbrella, but it did. Okay, so it was right about near that. It's right about there, I think. Give or take. Yep. Like that. Go ahead and do like that. Go ahead and crash the game here, and I believe it throws those into pictures, screenshots maybe? Where does it throw those? So let's see, Nvidia would put them where? I can just say sort by date, video. All right, well, that's one place to put them. All right, so that's modified. That's pretty close there. So it's still getting it over there towards the side here of the screen. You can just tell how blurry it is. And so I really do think that the engine is loading in kind of like this chromatic aberration nonsense that affects the corner, like something to do with the edge of the screen, where it just has like this like, yeah, see, look at that. It is the chromatic aberration. You see the split. So it's still getting loaded in for whatever reason. Yeah, look at that. I don't know. I don't know what jackass found out how to make that feature and then put it as a standard feature in new modern games. But man, I hate that feature. All right. So overall, you can definitely tell I love the repeated pattern of the branches. They're just where it just splotched onto the screen there. But you can definitely tell the difference between the rendering distance of the grass. I love how the grass is actually, and you can see the distance all the way over here and actually see the foliage off in the distance. And it looks like the shadow system, so you can actually tell over in the bottom corner here, there's a lot more detail in the shadow itself out on the water. It makes a big difference. And there's actually debris out in the water, which I think is a big help. And it looks like the AO is going to help make even like rock faces and stuff like that, like it always does. But it really is just a big difference between the vegetation, I think. Because you can just tell where before there's just not a lot out there in that blue, man. That blue's intense. But even looking at the difference between these two, it also makes me want to kind of move the saturation even a little less blue overall. But yep, so that's the first pass. Thank you guys so much for joining and hanging out. So somebody stayed on. I had one concurrent viewer that whole time. Thank you for hanging out and watching the process. And I look forward to getting this version out to you guys. I think this is going to be pretty good. I'm already having a lot of fun. The part that I haven't gotten in there yet is where guns are going to play a critical role in this game. With the NPC characters, taking down the masses of zombies. I just have to figure out the balancing with the game. It's been out long enough to where, I don't think we have to worry too much about, are we going to spoil guns? I think that's pretty much been, already done. But I am very interested in the fact that in every single one of these games in the different series, guns, bows, crossbows, all that stuff are always the afterthought. Always bizarre, because in this type of game, and I know they didn't necessarily do that with this one, with that one female character special. She had the firearm special. I just think it's really interesting, and I would really like to try to go for a good blend as you progress through the game and actually be able to enjoy a good blend between those two things, so that the game feels a little bit more chaotic, clearing different areas with the gun, and then actually having that spawn system not respawn enemies right behind you. I'm still looking for clearing areas and feeling rewarded for doing so. And so a lot of that will be coming soon. At least the first pass of the mod will be coming out here shortly. But I'm going to continue to dial it in as I continue to play through, because I'm super excited to get back in the game and actually play this one again. All right, guys, thanks again, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Happy